Hello, welcome to the Career Discovery podcast. On the show today, we'll be learning about our guests' area of expertise, their career journey, and what they wish they'd known when they were just starting out. Thanks so much for watching. We really hope you enjoy the show. Liz, hello, and welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you, Jo?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And I know that the audience are going to appreciate it too. So thank you so much.
No worries. I'm very excited.
Well, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it for?
Okay, so I was born and raised in Los Angeles, so you can tell by this lovely American accent. But I moved here when I was 20 years old. I started off as a study abroad student, loved England so much, I decided, actually, I want to do an internship. So I applied to this internship called Mountbatten, and what they do is they bring American students, graduates from the US over to the UK, and they place you in one of the big companies. It could be anything, JP Morgan, UBS, anything like that. And vice versa. They take UK student graduates and put them into companies in New York. And they put you up for a year. You have a 1-year visa. You get to just integrate. You're like a proper employee of the company. It's fantastic. You don't get paid very much, but it's a fantastic opportunity. Yeah. And I loved England so much that I was like, oh my God, I just need to live here. What am I going to do? And so I looked for an opportunity. Didn't actually happen straight away. So I moved to Japan for a little bit, and I have a degree in psychology and child development. And I thought, maybe I could be a teacher. That sounds like it could be exciting. I went to Japan for 6 months. I was teaching kindergarten, lovely kids, but I realized actually, no, I'm not a teacher. I really enjoyed finance. Nobody ever thought I would. Everyone was like, you're a psychology major. And I said, don't worry, I'm going to find my way in this field. And so sure enough, I was working in training and development at UBS Wealth after I moved here permanently. And I was sitting down one day just kind of waiting because I was doing some training courses, and someone comes out and he's like, why do you do training? And I said, well, because I have a degree in psychology and this is kind of training and development works. And he was like, no. You are a salesperson. You need to be in sales. And I was like, oh, yes, that's me. Call me salesperson. So I had no idea about products. I had nothing. But he was like, look, personality, you can't teach. People engagement, you can't teach. What you can teach is product knowledge. That's it. He goes, go take your IMC. And I thought, oh God, really? I got to go back and do some studying for goodness sake. I was like, all right, I'll do that. Funnily enough, funny story, because he was the first person I had to deliver a training course to on interviewing skills. Who was he going to interview? Me, the next day. Brilliant. It was just fantastic. So I was like, right, interview skills and so on. And then I got hired and I was working in sales, doing an integration role. It was fantastic. I loved it. And then the crisis hit, GFC, so the global financial crisis. I was made redundant. I had a baby. Whoa, can you believe that? I have a 14-year-old daughter, out of this world. And I was like, okay, so I get to take 2 years out and raise this kid. Yeah, and I was not a stay-at-home mom kind of person. So I would look for a job very quickly. And I started working for Barclays Wealth, selling structured products. Now, again, I didn't know anything about structured products. And when I mean nothing, I literally called up a friend and I was like, look, I need you to give me a 1-hour quick lowdown on structured products, how they work, what they do. And he was like, you're going to sell these things? I was like, yeah, it'll be fine. Don't worry. So I did. And then I did 3 years, at Barclays Wealth doing structured product sales. I ran a team there for a bit. And then I was headhunted to go and work for a company called ETF Securities. Again, another product. What ETFs? I don't know what they are. Yeah, it's a passive. It kind of works like a structure. Just go and learn how to do it. Sure enough. And then I was looking after UK wealth clients. I head up Spain, so I speak Spanish fluently. So again, another plus to be able to speak a second language. And then I did about 5 years there. Then I moved to Vanguard, doing again an ETF sales specialist role. And then I did moved over to Amundi, which is, so I've gone from a I've done a Swiss bank. I've done an English bank. I've done a small boutique English asset manager, a large asset manager, US asset manager, a large French asset manager. And ta-da, we're here today. So now I am heading up the index sales team for EMEA at Morningstar, which is like a FinTech type company. So it's slightly different to what I've been doing before. But like I said, you can learn to do a product, any product you can learn about. It's your personality. It's the engagement. It's the sales piece. It's like really key. So I know that was a kind of long intro. Sorry about that.
Before we get into it, this is a podcast. Are you into podcasts?
I am actually. I became a podcast person over lockdown.
Yeah. And what do you enjoy listening to?
It's a bit controversial. I mean, I debated whether or not I was going to tell you about this. No, it's serious because, sometimes you go through personal things in your life and you have to decide, how am I going to overcome this? So I started listening to a lot of podcasts about like women and like moving forward. So at the moment, my favorite podcast is by a lady called Michelle Dempsey. And it's called Moms Moving On. And so I went through a divorce and I decided, you know what, I really need to get to grips with it. And, no matter how strong you are as an individual, sometimes you just need to hear that other people are going through the same things. And that was the opportunity. So that's my favorite podcast at the moment. And I wake up and I'll just listen to like 15 minutes of it. And I'm like, oh yeah. Oh, I really needed to hear that today. That really inspired me.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I'm totally with you. Whenever, this is the new journey for me, the podcasting journey, the entrepreneurial journey. And, there are days when I'm thinking, am I doing the right thing? But if I put on a motivational or an inspirational podcast that's on topic, I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this. So I'm with you all the way there. Okay. Perfect. So your area of expertise is sales. Before we kind of get into that, I'd really like to talk about the misconceptions of sales. I think sometimes our friends and families, have no clue what we're doing all day. So what would your friends and families who are maybe outside of the industry think you're doing all day?
Oh, so they think that I go out to lunch a lot and I have a lot of alcohol. And I'm just kind of hanging out all the time, talking to people. And don't get me wrong, there is an element of that. But the truth of it is it's, clients, building relationships. It's so much more than that. It's really kind of understanding what are your needs. So yes, you do go out and have a glass of wine or you do go out and have a meal, but you're really getting to know the individual, getting to know their company. So it's a lot more than just, we're just chatting about nothing. We're really trying to understand what their needs are. Yeah. Now that's one side of it. That's it, the fun part. But then you have a target. So you need to make sure, so you can have as many chats as you want, but at the end of the day, you better be delivering something. So that's the reality. That's where the pressure hits, and whether it's an annual target, whether it's a quarterly target, whether it's a monthly target, it's, there's pressure because you need to get that money in the door. So how do you close that deal? So there's a great movie. It's ABC, Always Be Closing. So you're always closing. Mentally, you're always closing. And don't get me wrong. Sometimes, it can happen very quickly. Sometimes it can take years because they're building their proposition. You're having to help them build their proposition. Things change. There's a recession. There's a crash. So you have to just have such patience and really perseverance and resilience, I would say, is part of sales. And, sometimes I'm having a bad day. I don't want to be happy and, oh my God, this is so great. But that's part of it because these people are looking at you. They want to have a conversation with you and they don't want to hear about how terrible your day is. They want to hear about all the positive things. And, they want you to come up with a solution for what they're looking for. Or if you don't, how can we work together to make a solution possible? Yeah. So it's a lot more. So my friends think, oh my God, your job is the best. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, if that deal doesn't close, it's not the best. Or on the other side, deal closes, money comes in, and then 6 months later, 12 months later, the client changes their mind. They've decided, actually, we're not going to be invested in that product anymore. We're going to pull all those assets. Now, you are then starting from a negative level, and then you have to build that back up. So you're having to get more clients to come in to build up your AUM target. And you're thinking, gosh, I've just worked 2 years on that, and now all of a sudden I have to start all over again. So, it's not what people think. Don't get me wrong. It's fun. It's great. I love it. I wouldn't do anything else. Actually, I probably would be a psychologist, but it is kind of being a psychologist when you do sales, I have to say.
Yeah. So highs and lows for sure.
Absolutely.
Usually at this point, I ask our guests to give us an overview of the industry. And you've, given that you've worked in banking and asset management and now FinTech, maybe it would be helpful for you to maybe give us a quick overview, but kind of call out the key differences or how those industries fit together.
I think they all need each other. There's always, when you think about the banking, right, they have an underlying client. Their underlying client are individuals like you and I, right? So the private banking, wealth management, anything like that, they're delivering a solution for these clients to grow their money. All of them are one thing have in common. They all want to make money. They all want to make money for themselves, and they want to make money for their clients. That's the bottom line, right? But you need all of the various levels. So you have the private banking space. They're creating products or they're selling products to their underlying clients. You have the asset management space. They're the ones that are actually building these products, putting the products together, and then selling them to the private banks or to the wealth managers. That's another layer. Now, FinTech, they're the ones that actually have the index. What the asset manager is going to use to create the product is delivered by a FinTech company like Morningstar. They'll have the research, they'll have the underlying calculations for the indices. They'll be doing lots of different things. So they are actually all connected. Yeah. And it's fantastic. So I've literally gone through the entire ecosystem of what it is, starting off with private banking, wealth, and then asset management, and now, really delivering from the top all the way to the bottom. So it's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, it's great to sort of see how they all connect together. And like you say, they complement each other. Okay.
Absolutely.
So if we think about sales as a profession within financial services, what would you say that your organization relies on you for? Or what would you say your clients rely on you for? How would you answer that? So the purpose of your role, essentially.
Okay, so expertise. So I need to know what our product offering looks like. Can we deliver a solution that's going to work for you and your clients? And if we can't deliver it, can we modify it? So no matter what, so whether it's wealth, whether it's asset management, whether it's FinTech, all of them, we are looking to sell a product into an underlying client. And therefore the client is looking at us as salespeople as a subject matter expert. So we know how the product works, how it was built, what it's actually going to do, how it's going to work in their portfolios. Does it do exactly what it says on the tin? Is it a little bit skewed? So you need to really understand everything. Are we going to get it on a platform, for example? Are all the logistics built in there? So they're relying on you to be able to make their acquisition or their solution in their portfolio as straightforward as possible. So you need to make it easy for them to be able to buy and sell that product, number one. Also, client services. You need to be that person that if they pick up the phone and they're having an issue because it's not working somewhere, you need to be able to resolve that. And I have literally gotten myself into all sorts. People will say, Liz, someone's not paying me this. And I'm just like, excuse me, I'm sales, but okay, sure, don't worry. And you just have to be able to roll up your sleeves and get in there and resolve the problem for the client. And that's what sales is. You need to be on it. And I mean, we go on holiday, right? And you're never really on holiday. I mean, personally, I never think I'm on holiday because I like to look at my phone. I like to make sure, okay, if someone's going to say, oh, by the way, I'm looking to invest 100 million into this S&P 500 product or whatever, I want to be able to say, yeah, absolutely, not a worry. I'm going to put you in touch with someone that's going to help you. I'm not in the office at the moment, but someone will be able to sort this out for you. And it's responsiveness. It's very important.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And actually, you touch on two things that I think would be key, really great to expand on if we can. And that's the importance of the sales team and also how sales is connected with other parts of the business. So I'm thinking marketing and product and so on, and that it takes that village to service the client.
Oh, 100%. And you need to have a good portfolio manager that's putting a portfolio together that's working. You need to have a good marketing team because they're going to be putting all of the documentation together so that you can give it to the client. You need to make sure that it's literally takes the entire company. You're just a face of that product. That's it. But all of these other people behind you are putting all of that information together. And don't get me wrong, you need a portfolio manager to come in and to explain how he's put the portfolio together, what he's actually done, how it works, why they've chosen what they've chosen. I can only say, look, this is the product. This is why it's good. The portfolio manager will then come in and actually explain everything about why they've decided to do what they've done.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one there. And then, the sales team.
Yeah, exactly.
So you need a strong cohort of salespeople and that are all on the same level. And it's about working together because at the end of the day, if one of you is out, someone else has to pick up and do it for the client because we're all striving for the same thing. When it comes to a target, it's yes, you have an individual target, but you also have a team target. So as a team, you need to collectively work together to ensure, okay, we've got AUM of, 300 million for this year. How are we all going to do it? Where is it going to come from? Some clients are going to be smaller. Some clients are going to be bigger. So we all have to work together. We have to share notes where there were successes, where there were failures. What can we do better as a team? So it's very important to have a good sales team around you. Yeah.
Thank you. So if we were to zoom in to an average day or week in your sales life, what activities might we find you doing?
Well, I did say earlier, I do a lot of lunches. That's part of it. So no, not that many, not anymore. The industry's changed a lot. I think a few years ago, it was definitely like that. Meeting with people. So I'll probably meet with anywhere between 3 and 4 people on a daily basis, calls. So every day is a different day. No 2 days are ever the same. That is one of the best parts about this role. It's, one day you will have 5 client meetings. One day you'll be standing up presenting. One day you will be at a conference. One day you're doing internal stuff because you're making sure that the marketing is going to work. So, or that you have the right paperwork. Every day is completely different. Some days you are having a good time. Sometimes you are out at lunch, having a client lunch and discussing what they're going to do and how they're going to invest. Some days you're firefighting because the product that was supposed to go into this portfolio didn't go in because the client decided. And so every day is completely different. So I couldn't say to you on an average but definitely client meetings. So I would like to say that I meet anywhere between 5 and 7 clients on a weekly basis, different points, maybe a coffee, maybe a Zoom call now that we've got Zoom. So it's all very just dependent.
Yeah. Yeah. And how does, for those that don't know, how do you get clients?
Right. So when I first started, I'd get a list and they were like, right, these are all the wealth management firms or all the IFA firms in the north of England. And you need to do a little bit of research, find out who the head is, who the portfolio manager is, whatever, who the IFA is. And you call them and you say, hi, it's Liz. I'm calling from blah, blah, blah. Are you interested? So there's a lot of cold calling. That was like really early on in my career. And then with time, you build relationships, people will introduce you. You have to do a lot of networking. So whether it's a conference or whether it's, a friend of a friend who knows someone else. So all salespeople all know each other. We're all very interconnected. So someone will be like, do you know someone at this company? And you're like, oh yeah, I know so-and-so. And they're like, perfect. Can you link me up or can we do some drinks together? And you're like, yeah, not a worry. So we do a lot of that. But again, sometimes it's just research. You go onto a website or you're reading a lot of the financial news. So there's a lot of different kind of industry publications where a wealth manager or an asset manager will be saying something. You're like, oh, they're interested in that. Okay, let me pick up the phone. Who was the person? And don't get me wrong. You're not always going to get through. Sometimes it takes a fair few tries. Eventually they'll pick up the phone and be like, oh, you have to send lots of emails. You have to really have some hard skin, and you just have to say, it's okay. They will pick up the phone. And then that's where your opportunity lies. So it's a very, very small window, because once you do get that phone call or that meeting, you need to make sure that they want to pick up the phone to you next time.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah.
But it takes time.
So I'm guessing if we think about your career journey, it probably started off with more client acquisition, but then it becomes more about client retention and building that relationship and seeing what other products that client might be interested in, and making sure that you're the person they call when they need something.
Absolutely. So if we kind of go back to where I was saying earlier about my career and the progression. So I started with independent financial advisors, right? So very different segment of the market. They're much more retail oriented, underlying clients. So people like you and myself, we are their clients. Now, I then moved to a second tier, which was business to business again. So now there's an intermediary between the IFA and myself, so a wealth manager. So they would be then saying to the IFA, okay, we've got this portfolio management that we can do. So there's a lot of different tiers in there. And I think, as you progress through your career, you become much more of a subject matter expert. So you can then start speaking to people that have more questions, are going to need more knowledge. So it just depends on where you want to go. Some people decide they only ever want to service and be salesperson to an IFA. Some will only ever want to be to wealth managers. Some will only ever want to be to asset managers, private banks. It just depends.
Yeah. Oh, really fascinating. Thank you. So are there any things that happen less frequently throughout the year? I don't know, some really exciting things or really stressful things that, they're not happening on an average week, but, they do fall under your remit.
Signing of contracts. So sometimes if a provider decides that they're going to change the way that they do something, you have to really kind of start from the beginning, and contract signatures and making sure that you've got everybody aligned in the same place at the right time. And that can be very stressful because you're having to have lots of calls. Or if something goes astray with a client, if a client doesn't get what they needed or there's a mistake made. And these are things that don't happen very often. They don't, thank goodness. But when they do happen, it is all hands on deck. It is everybody has to be on calls, and you're having calls back to back to ensure that whatever has to be delivered and has to be fixed is done as soon as possible. Now, that's the responsibility of the salesperson. You are that coordinator. Exciting things, award ceremonies. We get to go to those a lot at the end of the year and get to dress up, black tie, very fancy. And that's always really exciting because, you're nominated, your company's nominated, and those are the things that happen. Maybe I would say twice a year, end of the year, November, December time, and then in June. So, and then conferences, those are also quite unique. So lots of different kinds of conferences happen throughout the year. And it just depends if your product set is viable to go to one of these conferences so that you can talk to clients about it. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Tell me what you love most about the role.
The people. It's the people. Like, I would not enjoy every single day if it weren't for all the people I get to meet. And by the way, everyone's different. No two people are ever the same. You will get the most diverse range of people. I mean, it's changed a lot. So if I think about when I first started in the industry, so I started at UBS Wealth when I was 24 years old, and it was predominantly men. Now, with time, things have really changed. And now I have women portfolio managers, there's a lot of women in marketing. So lots of different kinds of clients, research analysts. So it's the sphere of people that are now around you is very different, lots of different backgrounds. And that's what I love. It's getting to know everybody's individual way of working, what their needs are, how they kind of communicate with you. And I mean, there has to be something said. Obviously, that psychology piece in me does enjoy that part. But you have to be in it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you. And what about what are the biggest challenges of the role?
Sometimes it's a waiting game. So you could be working with someone for a really long time and everything, you're like, yep, it's going to happen. And then at the last minute, they change their mind, or the strategy changes, or their heads decide that it's not viable for them to go with a particular product. Pricing doesn't work. The competitor comes in and undercuts you. All of these things can be really challenging because you spend so much time sometimes with a client getting them to that end. And all of a sudden, right when you're there, it gets like the rug gets taken from under you. And that's challenging because you're like, I've just spent 8 months, a year, working on this. And you're telling me what? So that can be a challenge. Really challenging because you're like, that's my target. That's my target that I needed to put. Oh no, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go find this money now?
Yeah. And how do you recover from those events? Because I'm guessing that's a mindset piece.
Oh God, yeah. You just have to think, okay, you know what? Clients are allowed to change their mind. And let's go for the next one. So you always have a list of prospects, right? You always have a list of clients that you're targeting. You're always looking at what's viable in the market. What are people looking at? Where's an entrance? Where's the appetite? You go back to some of your old clients. Are you looking at anything else? Is there anything else I can, persuade you to buy or to look at, or something that's of interest? And you have to just be so resilient. That's the key, I think. I've had a deal that came in. It was a huge deal, really kind of did my target for the year, the middle of the year. It was amazing, fantastic. Everyone was like, oh my God, Liz, you're so great. Amazing, amazing. Applaud, applaud. I was like, yes. And no joke, 9 months later, the client was like, actually, we're going to change our strategy. We're going to pull all that money out. And I was like, what? And the worst part was I didn't even get a phone call. Like they just did it. And I was like, where's that money going? So you just have to say, okay, and you have to keep to the client, say to them, okay, look, help me understand because I need to deliver the message up to senior management to let them know that this is why. And at the end of the day, you have no control about what the client does and how their strategy changes. That is completely and utterly up to them. So you just have to say, thank you so much. If there's anything else that we could be of service with or something that we may have in our repertoire of products, let us know because we can obviously do something for you there. And you just have to be open-minded all the time.
Yeah. Wow. So looking back at your sales career, what's your proudest moment? What are you most proud of that you'd like to share with us?
What's my proudest moment? Gosh, I've had so many. Oh, when I was shortlisted for Saleswoman of the Year.
Wow.
And I would say, to be honest, even just my new role at the moment, I feel so excited and so kind of empowered at the moment. I've had really wonderful feedback from like a lot of my clients and just people in the industry who are like, Liz, this is amazing. So definitely being nominated for Saleswoman of the Year and shortlisted. Unfortunately, I didn't get it, but that's okay. And now this new role, like heading up a sales team, really kind of getting to grow something. And it's just amazing. It's an amazing feeling when you know that you are responsible for a team and you're going to help them really kind of build it out and make something exciting happen.
Yeah. Wow.
So those are my two proudest moments, I would say.
Oh, thank you so much. One thing I did want to touch on before we get into your career journey is the client entertainment piece. And you already mentioned that, we've made gains in terms of more females in the industry. But I'm wondering how you manage that juggle. You mentioned that you've got a child. How did you manage that juggle? And maybe what advice could you share for others?
Yeah, look, it takes a village. I'm not going to sit here and say I did it all by myself. I have had great au pairs. I've had great grandparents. I had a great dad, as in her dad, Isabella's dad. He was there. So you need to have a good support network. Doing the job that you do. Sometimes it can be long hours. Sometimes, you are out in the evenings. The industry has changed a lot, though, if to be honest. I mean, pre-COVID, you were out a lot more. There was a lot more client entertainment because, you want to be building that relationship. Now, post-COVID, there's a lot less of that. So you're doing more breakfasts, you're doing more lunches, less evening things. Yeah. So it really has shifted. Now, do I see it going back to pre-COVID? Probably not for a while, just because people are enjoying the fact that they get to be home of an evening, or they're working from home a lot more. So it's really changed in that regard. But, I would never, ever say, especially when you're in sales, you need to be in the office. You have to be here because that is how you build a relationship. So whatever you can get, whether it's a coffee, a breakfast meeting, or a lunch, anything, make sure you take it, because that is key. That is key to really, and a long-term relationship, not short-term, not a product push, a proper relationship where, if you move from one company to another, that client will still look at you and say, actually, you've gone here. Do you think that your new company has X, Y, Z? So.
Yeah. Oh, that's helpful. Thank you. All right. So let's move on to your career journey. And I already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What did you want to be when you were young? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I gave it away earlier. I was going to be the CEO of Disney. Like, that was it. I was like, to be fair, that didn't become my goal until I was in my early 20s. But my very, very first thing. So when I was 14 years old, I met someone, and she was at university. She was 19, and I found her fascinating. I was like, oh my gosh. And she was like, I'm studying psychology. And I was like, oh, what is that? And at this point, I was 14 years old. What did I know? What did a psychologist mean? And she kind of told me about it. And I thought, wow, I want to do that. And I was adamant. I'm going to be a psychologist. I'm going to be a psychologist. I'm going to be a psychologist. And I went to university, and I did a psychology degree, and I worked with children. So I did a child development degree. So I was like, I'm going to be a child psychologist. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And I went through the entire 4 years really adamant. And I came to the end of it. And don't get me wrong, I would still do it now. I love what I do. But there is an element of psychology that goes into it, but it's listening, understanding, taking it in, really kind of being part of people's lives. And so that is what I wanted to do. I want to be a psychologist.
Yeah. And that was inspired by somebody you came across.
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to us about the transition from wanting to be a psychologist to wanting to be the CEO of Disney. And what inspired that?
I love Disney. No, I was like, no, I really did love Disney. Yeah. I was one of these, like, born and raised in LA. So you had a Disneyland annual pass. We went to Disneyland like every other day if you could, possibly. So that was me. I was like, yeah, let me go to Disneyland. And I just remember thinking, I could be the chief executive officer of a company like Disney. I could really see me growing something and just building and being out there and managing. Like, in my head, obviously, in my 20s, I was 22 maybe. I was like, this is what I want to do. And I mean, it is a dream, a very long shot dream, but I was like, I can manage. I want to run something. And whether it's, in finance or Disney, it was about leading. It was about leading. That was it. That's what it came down to. I wanted to be a leader. And I felt that I had the skills to be a leader. And, I was like, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to be the CEO. But it was because I was so passionate about Disney. So you have to be passionate about something, right? And it doesn't matter what it is when you're 19, 20 years old. But I was passionate about Disney, and I thought it was such an amazing company. And, you know, you walked into Disneyland, it just always made you feel happy. And you were like, oh my God, this is so great. So yeah, I think that was it really. It was just one of these things that I aspired. You know, everyone has you have to have a dream. You have to aspire towards something. And I think that was, for me, that was something that I thought, and I at least wanted to work for Disney. I only worked for the cinema at one point when I was like 16.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, at least I've worked for the Disney cinema. So I've done something along the way.
I love that story, and actually, I mentioned it recently to another guest because, and I don't know, and this is probably a broad brush generalization. I don't know if it's the difference between Americans and Brits, but I just love that you were able to dream so big. You know, I just didn't dream that big when I was younger, and I feel sad about that, you know. And I didn't dream this, but I could imagine dreaming I want to work for Disney, but I don't think I would have ever dreamt I want to be the CEO of Disney. And I think that's why sharing these stories is so important, because I really want to get the message out there that, you know, you can dream big and you should dream big.
You know, it's an interesting one because I found that when I first moved to England, you know, and a lot of people always say Americans just have such bigger aspirations. You know, you think about so much more about what you want to do. And maybe if I really kind of revert back to, you know, my family, my background. So my parents were both immigrants from El Salvador. I'm first generation American. So my mom was a hairdresser. My dad was a mechanic. They were, you know, doing very working class jobs. And my mom said to us, you know, by the way, I'm the eldest of 7, so you can only imagine. My mom said to us, she said, look, we've given you guys an opportunity. You're born in America. I mean, for my mom and my dad, that was a huge thing, huge. Now they're like, we can only provide you with one thing, and that's an education. And you have to aspire to do more, to be better. My mom was like, do you really want to be a hairdresser standing for 11 hours a day? She's like, no. She's like, you want to be successful. You want to do something that's really going to, you know, empower you and give you the opportunities that we came to this country for. Yeah. And I just remember being so young. I always knew I was going to go to university. Always knew that. There was no second thoughts. I always knew I wanted to graduate with honors. I was like, I'm going to graduate with honors, you know, because I've been given this opportunity, and you can do anything you put your mind to, anything. And I always say this, you know, I love talking to my 14-year-old daughter, who I say to her, look, you have it all here, but you have to want that. You want to be driven. You want to say, okay, and she wants to be a lawyer. And I think that's great. Now, she's going to probably change her mind 10 times along the way, but she's like, I want to be a lawyer. I want to do this. I want to be a barrister. And I'm like, you know what? Whatever you want to do, you can do. You have to put your mind, you have to sacrifice, but you can make it happen. And I think that's the one thing I would always say is, you know, my mom said to me, I'm sacrificing for you. You need to make it work for you.
Yeah. Oh,
so
I love that. All right. So you do psychology at uni and you graduate with honors. And what happens next?
Of course. So like I said, I was like, so I did a semester abroad before I moved to England. And
in England?
I was like, in England. So so just a little bit more background. So I'd never gotten on an airplane until I was 19 years old. And my first airplane journey was to Italy with a friend. And I just remember, I'll never forget. I was like, oh my God, the turbulence, we're going to fall out of the sky. What's going to happen? And my friend was like, relax, we're not going to fall out of the sky. TWA, I mean, the airline doesn't even exist anymore. And we came to Italy. We did 6 weeks. And I was in love. I was like, oh my God, I love Europe. I need to live in Europe. And I said to her, we need to move to Europe. And she's like, what? I was like, come on, we're in our last year at uni. We need to do this. We can make it happen. And she was like, Liz, I've got 2 years. She's doing biology. I'm doing psychology. We had some core classes we needed to. I was like, oh, we'll be fine. Don't worry. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. And so she was just like, all right. So we both applied, got in, did a semester abroad. And I was just like, I love London.
Yeah.
We are so close to the rest of Europe. You can jump on an airplane and go anywhere. And I was like, I need to come back. I need to come back. So that was my last year at uni, the fall semester of my last year at uni. That spring semester for spring break, I went to Chicago to visit my friends that I met whilst I was at uni here in London. And they were still doing finals. One whole day I just spent looking, how can I get back to England? And I found this internship program called Mountbatten. And they had already done all their interviews in Los Angeles. And I was just like, oh, shoot, I've missed it. So, but I still submitted. So they wanted a CV. They wanted your transcripts. They want all this stuff. So I submitted it all and I get a call back and they're like, are you interested in having an interview? And it has to be in person. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, you have to come to New York. And I'm thinking, all right, no worries. Got it. Called my mom. I was like, Mom, I need you to let me borrow some money. I need to book a flight to New York. She's like, you're in Chicago. What do you mean you need to book a flight to New York? And I was like, Mom, I need to do this interview. I want to get this job. And she's like, what? And I was like, just come on. So she was like, all right, fine. So I booked this flight to go to New York for a long weekend. Well, I say long weekend. It was I think Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. My friend was living there at the moment. And so it must have been June time. Get to New York. Brilliant. This internship program, Mountbatten. I really, it still runs to this day. It's fantastic. So I'm being interviewed. Okay. So this is going to teach you all a lesson. Always prep, always prep. So I've prepped for the basic questions. Last question. So, who do you admire? Who do you look up to? And I'm like, oh, someone famous. And I was like, someone famous. I don't know. I can't think off the top of my head. I hadn't even practiced for this question. And I said, oh, my high school teacher, Shelley Heffler. Oh, no, that does not someone else. And I was like, bearing in mind, Bill Clinton, right? So I say Bill Clinton as he's getting impeached. I was like, I'm never going to get this internship. I've just said Bill Clinton. And she goes, wow, that's an interesting one. Can you talk me through that? And I was like, well, he lied. He made a mistake. People make mistakes. He's just a real man. She must have been like this crazy girl. So 2 weeks later, I get an email saying, hi, you've been accepted. I was like, yes. Oh my God. So that's only one part. Second part, they then send your CV out to all of the different companies and someone has to say, oh yeah, that person looks interesting. We'll interview her. And I got that at UBS investment bank. So I got an interview. I'll never forget. It was London time. I was in Los Angeles, 8-hour difference. And she was like, oh, can we do an interview at 4 p.m. my time? I'm thinking it's 8 a.m. my time. And I was reading about, how do you do interviews? And it was like, pretend that you're going to do it in person. So I got up 6 a.m., showered, got ready, did my makeup, put my suit on because I was going to do this interview. By the way, there's no Zoom. This is all over the phone. So I'm all dressed up for my interview. And I was like, yes. And then I just had to wait. And then I get a phone call, an email another 3 weeks later. And they're like, yeah, you've got the position. You're moving to London, in August of 2002.
Wow.
And that's how
where it all started.
That's where it all started.
And that was a year, that internship.
It's exactly 12 months. So you sign a contract saying your visa is only valid for a year. You have to leave after a year. So I was done after that. And I was like, I don't want to leave England. But then I was like, actually, no, this is a good opportunity. And that's when I decided to, and I wasn't sure, actually, if I'm really, really honest, I wasn't sure if finance was the right thing for me. It was like,
what department were you in?
I was doing training and development. So I was I was kind of like the admin assistant running the senior managers regime. So when they were coming in as senior managers and they were going to get promoted, they had to go through an extensive coursework and just a bit of rigor and just making sure that they were doing the right thing. So I was running that, making sure, are you doing the coursework? Are you doing your CFA, or are you getting a master's, and just that kind of stuff. So, and then we would have like programs specifically tailored for these specific employees. So I did that for 12 months. So I wasn't really sure if I wanted to stay in that kind of industry. So I thought, actually, I'll go back to what I know. And that's when I went to Japan. and taught kindergarten. And then I realized, oh my God, no, I can't deal with these kids. So I came back and I was like, yeah, I can do finance.
So did you go Japan back to LA to England, or straight from Japan back to England?
No, I did Japan, LA. So I did 6 months in Japan. And then I was like, right, I think maybe I need to go home now for a little bit. And I called my godmother. You know, you always have to have connection somewhere. So I called my godmother and I was like, I need a job. And she was like, oh, I've got a job for you. I was like, oh, brilliant. Yes. And she's like, it's a sales role. And I was like, selling what? She's like, concert tickets for the Hollywood Bowl, the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And I was like, so by the way, in America, in Los Angeles, the Hollywood Bowl is actually an outdoor amphitheater. It's not the bowling alley. Just to clarify that. And so, because I once said that, someone looked at my CV. They're like, you looked at the Hollywood Bowl? And I was like, yeah, it's actually a really cool job. They're like, the bowling alley. I was like, no. Oh. So I worked the Hollywood Bowl doing sales, and it was group sales. So like ticketing and just making sure that people were like happy with the tickets and the groups that they were bringing along. So yeah, that was I did that for 9 months, and then I moved to England in November of 2004 permanently. Yeah. So I've been here permanently since 2004.
Wow. And did you go back to UBS?
So funnily enough, I actually went through a recruitment agency and I gave them my CV and I said, look, this is where I've worked. This is what I've done. And I did contact UBS Investment Bank, but the recruitment agency actually got me a job within UBS Wealth. They were like, oh, you already know the systems. You already know the bank, you know the company. So I came to the, UBS Wealth, and I started off, by the way, as an admin assistant in the training and development function. And I said to them, I don't want to be an admin assistant for more than 6 months. And they were like, yeah, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to be a trainer. I want to be, delivering training. I want to be doing this. And they were like, okay, well, we can get you up to speed. You've got that teaching background. So yeah, absolutely. They were like, we'll start you off with all the soft skills. So I said, yeah, that's fantastic. I'll start with all the soft skills. Brilliant. And as I was just going to get that permanent role in that training development, my old boss from the investment bank calls me. She's like, Liz, do you want to have a role in the investment bank? And I remember sitting there with these two roles, and one was in the wealth. They were both at UBS, one investment bank, one wealth. Wealth is a lot softer. It's not as like full on, I would say, whereas investment bank can be a bit more like really kind of gets to you. Yeah. So I thought, actually, I know the team. I really liked everybody. The wealth guys, I've already been here for 6 months. So I decided to stay with the wealth role. And actually, it was the best opportunity because I did start doing the training, the soft skills training. So I was doing interview skills, managing your image. That was my favorite course. I'll never forget. I get a phone call from somebody in Jersey and goes, Liz, I need you to come and teach my team how to dress. And I was like, what? It's like, don't really think they're, they look the most professional sometimes and just like the little things. And I said, yeah, no problem. I'm thinking, how am I going to build this course without offending anyone? Because, you don't want to offend someone and be like, by the way, you don't dress very well. So I did a lot of research and that's how I started. So I was just doing lots of managing your image, interview skills, advanced selling relationship skills. So I would do a lot of like the mock interviews, like if you were selling to somebody, kind of questions that they would ask, that's that. And then I did that for just under 2 years.
Yeah. Amazing.
And then that sales opportunity came up.
Yeah. And actually, I think it's great what you say about you kind of, there's two things. Firstly, you took the admin job, even though you knew you didn't want to do the admin role long term, but you were, it was a way for you to get back in to the organization. So I think that's really good advice for anybody who is looking for the perfect job. You can go in and then find your perfect job. And then the point you make about choosing between those two opportunities that you had, one in wealth and one in the investment bank. And I think it's really listening to your gut, isn't it? And And it sounds as though that, the culture of each part of the organization really influenced your decision there. And I think it is important to listen to those things and know and really think about what culture and environment is going to be most suited to you. And I wonder if you would have taken the position in the investment bank, maybe you wouldn't have met that person who said you should be in sales. So I guess that's almost like one of those, how do you say, serendipity moments or something?
Serendipity. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. And I do think, you have to start somewhere. That's the reality of it, right? You have to, give anything a chance. And you're not always going to get the perfect job straight away. I couldn't go in there and say, well, I'm going to do this because I have, and I didn't have very much experience. I was just like, okay, I'll start as an admin assistant, thinking, God, I'll never do this for more than 6 months.
Yeah. And when that person said to you, you should do sales, obviously at that point you were set on this training and development career. What was going through your head when he put that, I guess, that option in your head?
I mean, don't get me wrong. Training and development is great, right? You get to develop people. You get to really get them to do and understand more about themselves. And it's very interesting. But I don't know, I guess for me, it was an important role, but not as important as a sales role. And I know that sounds a bit awful to say because, training and development is very important. You need your staff to be trained, to have this kind of, motivation to be seen as like, yes, we're looking into you. We're trying to progress your career. And that's great. And some people really love it and they go on and continue doing that forever. But I wanted to be someone that the business actually was like, okay, she is bringing in the revenue. She's doing something so much more. And I liked that. That excited me. The idea and the idea of just going out there and, developing the business and talking to these different clients, external clients. So you always have clients, no matter what kind of a role you do, internal, external, right? So so when I was doing training and development, my clients were all internal clients. So I still had to treat them with respect. I still had to listen. I still had to understand their needs. I still had to do very much the same of what I was doing as an external salesperson because they were my external clients. But it was just what the reward is. That's the difference, I guess. And the reward of doing sales is so much personal reward was so much greater for me, I would say.
Yeah. And I think it's about knowing yourself, isn't it? And I can't remember the terminology and I'm definitely not, I can't even remember, what is it? American football where they have the quarterbacks. I always remember, a colleague of mine in HR, I guess the CEO of Europe at the time always used to refer to her as his quarterback. And it almost depends which position you want to be in. Do you want to be, I don't know the position, the one that scores the goals, or do you want to be the quarterback? Are you fulfilled by internal relationships or would you like exposure to external clients? And again, I think it's just kind of thinking about what you enjoy and where you're going to be most fulfilled and happy and able to do your best work. Absolutely.
It's, the key thing with anything that you do in life, though, any role is, are you getting up in the morning excited about where you're going to go or are you dreading it? Yeah. And that's a really important piece is because if you're getting up and you're like, yes, I can't wait to get in the office. I've got so much to do. You're like thinking about it. You're like, this is exciting. That's where you want to be. But if you're getting up in the morning, you're like, oh my God, I couldn't think of anything worse. I'd rather stay in bed. So at the moment, I guess, it's very early days, but I'm getting up, that alarm goes off. I've already been up for 30 minutes thinking about what I'm going to do, how I'm planning my day. And that's the exciting part. Yeah. That's great. All right. So you've already shared that journey with us from UBS Wealth to where you are today through the various roles and products and industries. I'd really like you to share with us now, when you look back at that career journey, talk to us about the highs of the journey or perhaps the things that went really smoothly or. So the highs, every role I've ever gotten, which this is when you kind of really have to look at yourself and think, actually, I am really good. And don't get me wrong, there are some days when you will have a bit of imposter syndrome and you're like, God, am I really that good? But the best part is every time I get a phone call from someone and they say, look, I really think you'd be good at this role. And you're like, okay, you're considering me. I wasn't out looking. I've been considered for this role. Someone has actually looked at my experience, at my background, and has said, Liz is the perfect person for this role. That is a real high because that is recognition above and beyond. And probably one of the most exciting things that happened, I got a phone call one day from a headhunter and he said, really sorry, hope you have some time. And I said, yeah, sure. He's like, somebody that you worked with a long time ago, CEO of this company has recommended you for this role. And I was just like, I hadn't worked with this man for over 5 years, so 5 years down the line, he still is considering me as one of the best salespeople to run a team that he's ever worked with. I just thought, that's amazing. That's a real high right there. Cause then almost all the work and all the time and all the effort that you've put into something actually is recognized. Cause don't get me wrong. Sometimes you don't get that recognition. Sometimes you walk away from something and you're like, did they realize? Did they not know? Or, it's that moment, it's that aha moment that you get 5 years later. And he wasn't one to be, oh my God, Liz, you're doing a great job. Nope. Like he was very nice. We had a really good working relationship. He moved on. I moved on, but that was a real high, I would say. And just like all of the relationships I've built throughout the years, the fact that I have such good client relationships where every time I've moved, it's, that's fantastic. They're always happy to pick up the phone. They're always happy to have a conversation. Those are highs because it's very easy for people to see a salesperson as, oh, it's just another salesperson.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. What about the challenges of the career journey? Are there any of those you'd like to share with us?
You have to be prepared for anything. Just as we're going into this recession at the moment, industry's tough. I will never forget when I was made redundant. I will never forget the feeling, the moment, I was on maternity leave. I was supposed to have a keep in touch day, which is when you go back just to kind of see what the team is doing, where your role is going to fit in, how you're going to come back. It's a gradual process because you've been out for 9 months and then you're all of a sudden coming back, to this role. And I'll never forget, I was walking back. I was going to drop my daughter off at home and I had 2 missed calls. One was from my boss and one was from HR. And and my boss used to always be like, oh, I'm going to postpone this. And I was like, I hope you're not postponing this meeting. And he was like, no. The whole team has just been postponed. And I was like, excuse me? And he was like, the whole team has just been made redundant. And I'll never, like all of a sudden, everything I had envisioned for the next 6 months came tumbling down. And I was like, I don't have a job. Oh my God. I just had a baby and now I don't have a job. And now the world is going into like meltdown. And that was probably the biggest low. And I remember I cried and I had to remind myself that it wasn't me. It was not because I wasn't doing a good job. It was because the industry was suffering. There was a massive global financial crisis. There was going to be some cost cutting and it was just dependent on, where could they trim? And we were a team that was relatively new at the time. And so, and I had to look at the positive side. I had to just say, okay, I'm not going to have a job, but I get to raise my baby. So that's what I did.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. And I think you're right. It's, when these things happen that are a result of market conditions, it's knowing that they're not personal and trying to find the positives in what can be a really bleak and tough situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Can you talk to us about the role of mentors and role models on your journey?
Oh, I've been very lucky. I have to be really, really honest. And I've been very fortunate. I've had amazing mentors, and most of them, it was a mutual seeking out of. One was one that sought me out, was like, look, I think I can really mentor you and guide you and teach you. And I was like, oh, by the way, that's someone I didn't even like. I was like, I don't like you. And he was like, out of all the people I could possibly mentor, I decided to choose the most difficult one, of course. And I was like, he goes, but I also thought you'd be the one that I could teach the most. And I was like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But no, I've been very lucky. And I think it's because, I always try and be super open. I know what I know. I know what I don't know. And that's the reality, and like I said earlier, one of the things that most people suffer from is imposter syndrome. And, don't get me wrong. There's some days when I walk in and I'm like, do I really know what I'm talking about? Am I really going to do this? But I was, really great mentors along the way. Like the person who said, look, you'd be a great salesperson. He is still my mentor to this day. Like when I am contemplating moving roles, or when I'm contemplating what I'm going to do internally, or, now that I'm leading a team again, I'm like, okay, how do I make sure that I don't make mistakes? And he was like, you're always going to make mistakes, Liz, but just be aware that, it's a process. Always listen, be open, be transparent, but take the time. And so mentors are very, very important, and you can look for them. I love mentoring people as well. I'm very much like, if you need guidance, especially, the young people coming into the industry, because, whether you're male or female, it's a very different industry to the one that I joined, almost 20 years ago. Very different. Things have changed. There's a lot more technology. There's so many products now, so much challenging markets, so much competition. So it's, how can we get the best out of you, and really nurturing, because it's so important to feel appreciated, to feel valued, to feel like someone's looking out for you, to feel all of these things, because that's what you're going to give the most to, when you're being recognized. And you don't know what you don't know, right? You're still learning. It's a process. It takes years.
Yeah.
So that's the reality. So I've been very fortunate with that. I do have a number of mentors.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to talk to people and not be afraid to ask for help and get advice. And somebody that I used to work with talks about almost having like a board of directors. So, you'll have a selection of people who you'll go to for advice, but almost one might be an expert in a different topic. And I think that's a really nice way of, getting advice from a range of people. So I think it's really, really valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's exactly how I would see. That's a perfect analogy, actually. I would see it exactly like that. I have a good 5 mentors, and I will go to them for different things. I did say when I was doing the structured products, I was like, right, I need to know what structured products are. I know what they are. You need to teach me straight away. And he was like, Liz, you're going to interview for a role. You don't even know what you're going to be selling. I was like, yeah, that's the easy part. Just teach me the basics. So...
Oh, and actually, I can of course vouch for you helping me and a colleague understand the asset management industry a bit more when we did Learning with Liz.
Yes,
which I love.
Do you remember that? Those were the best. I know, it was so much fun. And I would start from the beginning. I was like, okay, I'm going to start from. But it's so important. It is so important, because people are scared to ask. We are all worried. Oh, what, are they going to think I don't know enough? And you're like, no, you have to start somewhere. This does not, doesn't come easy to everybody. You have to, people learn it, whether it's at university, whether it's on the job, asking questions. You have to have someone that you can trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you. So as we think about somebody who might want to go into sales within financial services, are there any, I guess, essential or helpful educations or trainings that somebody might need?
I would say start with something very simple like the IMC. So that's the Investment Management Certificate. It gives you an opportunity. It's a two-part paper, regulation. So everything that's happening currently in the market, what you need to understand, the regulations and so on. That's one piece. And the second part is the products, the product specific. The regulation is really just learn. The product piece, you need to understand derivatives. You need to understand some slightly more complicated things. It is probably the industry standard for you to have at least the IMC. Some people will do CFA. I don't think CFA is really necessary for sales unless you're going to be like a super duper like research analyst, manager selection, portfolio manager. So really everybody gets very caught up in, oh my God, I need to get a CFA. Oh my God, I need to do this. No. What do you want to do? Understand, and then go from there. Because otherwise you'll look back and you'll be like, I just did 3 years of studying and I got a CFA, which is great, but I'm not using the CFA. You really, really kind of narrow it down and say, okay, have the basics, IMC. And then if you think there's ESG certificates now, the industry's moving towards an ESG kind of lens. So there's a certificate for that. So if you decide to go into that kind of a sales type role, that might be quite important. So just really dependent, but industry standard, IMC, start there. A lot of it is on the job as well. So lots of the companies will have their own internal training that you will have to do as part of their sales, because everybody does sales slightly differently. So that's something that we always have to remember. You take pieces from every single company and you adapt them to yourself.
Yeah. That's great. And I think that's kind of gives people flexibility as well, because I think there is more of a choice of degree. You don't have to do a finance degree, for example, but this IMC is a really nice bolt on where you can learn about the industry. Okay. And we've talked about some of these skills, but I really love for you to share the softer skills that one might need to have to be successful in this industry.
I think you have to be a really good listener. I think you have to know your personality type. That's really important. I don't think people realize how important it is to actually understand your personality type, because it's how you deal with people, how you work with people, understanding people. Are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? I'll be honest. I was doing interviewing for a salesperson, and someone sat across the room from me, and I thought, and he was very adamant, I want to do sales. And I looked at him and I thought, do you really want to do sales? Because there is nothing in your body language, in your speech, at all that I see sales. As a salesperson, you have to be engaging. You have to really kind of, you want to connect with a client. So you need to have a level of, okay, how am I going to connect? And you have to find a way. Like everyone has their own personal way of connecting with clients. But if you have no kind of, I'm sorry, but no personality, then you don't want to, if you don't want to be in front of a person, if you don't want to be in front of clients, don't go into sales, because that's how you're never going to sell anything. So soft skills, listening, understanding, really open, transparent, these are the kinds of things. Friendly, you have to be quite friendly.
Yeah. And we've talked about resilience and relationship building skills. And I'm also hearing problem solving as well, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? You can't be afraid. That is one of the key things. You must not be afraid, because you will make mistakes. You will get it wrong sometimes. And you have to just say, it's okay. And you have to always own up to it. I made a
Yeah.
mistake. Really sorry. And you have to know when you don't know something. You have to be honest about that, because the last thing somebody wants is for you to give them wrong information. And then 6 months down the line, they come down and they're like, but you told me. So if you don't know something, you need to be like, really sorry. Don't know that just yet. Let me come back to you so I can make sure. Let me clarify. You don't even have to say that. You could be like, actually, I'm just going to get a clarification on that. So it's all about the language you use as well, making sure it's like always positive language. Really, just even if you don't know something, like positively say it in a positive manner. So you have to have a positive demeanor as well.
Yeah. And I would imagine that sales for some people would be almost as scary as, I don't know, presenting to a room of 100 people. So if you were to share your top tip for overcoming that fear, what would you say?
You're the subject matter expert. That is the one thing in my head. I always say, I know more than the people that I'm presenting to, whether it's presenting, whether it's sales, I know more. That's it. And you do. Yeah. You may not know a lot more. You may know 2 things more than they do, but you know more. Yeah. And you have to deliver it with confidence. Those are key things. It's, I know 2 more things than that person does, and I'm going to deliver it in a confident manner.
Yeah.
That's how you overcome it. I mean, when you stand in front of a room of 100 people, some people may know a lot more. Some people may know a lot less. You have to find that really nice balance and that middle ground to be able to say, okay, this is, I'm going to give you some of my expertise. I'm going to, bring this down and share with you what I know.
Yeah. That's really helpful. Yeah. Because the client is relying on you for your expertise. And if you can't deliver it confidently, they're going to question the credibility of your expertise. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so what does the future hold for the industry? You mentioned that we are, there is a lot of talk of a recession, the cost of living crisis, but, what do you see as the future for the industry?
It's really moving in a positive way. I think there's a lot of diversity and inclusion happening. So whereas if we look at 20 years ago, as I said earlier, when I first started, it was a really male-dominated industry and area. And, now we have a lot more diversity. We have a lot more inclusion. We still have a long way to go, if I'm really honest. The flexibility. So there wasn't enough flexibility for working moms. I think one of the things that happened along the way is a lot of women would come out of the industry. So they would do it for 5 years, then they get married, have children, and then they wouldn't come back because they didn't feel that they had the flexibility to be working moms. Now I can attest to that. I'm a working mom, full-time working mom. I've never done part-time. It's just one of the things, and you can make it happen. Now, post-COVID, in this post-COVID area world, there is a lot more flexibility. There's hybrid working. You can work from home. The companies are realizing that they're going to get the best out of their employees if they give them that opportunity to have that hybrid role and to have a work-life balance. I don't think there was a very good work-life balance before. Myself as an example, I was leaving my house at 7 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't getting home until 7, 8 o'clock at night. So I was spending 12 hours out of my house, not seeing my young child. Now I can decide, if I need to be in a little bit later because I need to drop her off at school, I know that I'll come home. I have a laptop. Everyone has laptops now. This was not the case 10 years ago. Maybe some people had laptops, but working from home was just so frowned upon. Now the industry's moving towards a much more work-life balance. How do we get the most out of our employees? Really diversity and trying to get in a very different range of working people into the industry.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So for aspiring people who might think sales in financial services is a career path for them, where would you suggest they go to find out more?
I would say try and do internships, try and do something that gets you into a company. I think there's a lot of work experience here in the UK, which is fantastic. And I think if you're interested in doing that. I wouldn't say online isn't the best way, because there's a lot of stuff online, but that's just written down. You want to be in there. You want to experience it. So do a 6-month work experience, do a 1-week work experience. I know there's a lot of schools that do, you have to go out to a company, use your network, use your parents, use your friends, anybody that you know. And if you're like, oh, do you work in this industry? Oh yeah. Do you think I could do a week? I mean, I've been asked before, oh, Liz, do you think you could allow us to come in to your company for a week? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I might not be there for that week, but I can find people that can guide you through the week and show you the different things. So I think, try and do work experience. And it doesn't matter what kind of sales you do. So if you're selling in a shop, if you're selling at a store, if you're selling at a restaurant, they all have the fundamental basics of be friendly, be open, and that's really the key, I would say. Yeah.
And I wonder in hindsight whether that Hollywood Bowl sales experience, it probably was helpful for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was selling tickets for the Los Angeles Philharmonic at the Hollywood Bowl. It was great. I loved it. I was talking to people all the time on the phone. And I think that's it. Like, if I really, really kind of think back, I was never afraid. So when I first started sales at Barclays Wealth, doing structured product sales, I wasn't afraid to pick up the phone. I was never afraid to pick up the phone. And don't get me wrong. People would be like, oh, I'm really busy. Or no, call me back tomorrow. And you're like, all right. And, resilience and perseverance, I would say key things for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So just to clarify, if you can't get experience or an internship in the industry itself, just try and get some kind of exposure to sales wherever that might be, because it will probably answer that question in your mind about whether this might be something that you would want to do longer term.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. As we move towards wrapping up, Liz, I'm wondering what you know now that you wish you'd known when you were just starting out.
I'm now never afraid to say I don't know something. When I first started, I made up a lot of things. I'd be like, and I would get caught out and I was like, oh, shoot. So I just ask questions all the time. If I don't understand it, ask the question, and don't be afraid, because no question is ever a dumb question. And that's one of the key things I've learned is, you will go through your entire life learning. You're always learning. Ask the questions. My 25-year-old self would be like, I can just wing this. No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's great advice. And actually, I think curiosity is one of the most admired attributes. So show your curiosity, ask questions. Okay.
Absolutely.
And what advice would you give to young Liz who wanted to be a psychologist and then be the CEO of Disney World?
Never stop dreaming. Never stop aspiring. Never, it doesn't matter if you can have a goal. That is the one thing. Have a goal, have some idea of where you want to go, and always dream big. You don't necessarily have to make it. It's not going to be exact. I'm not the CEO of Disney, right? I'm in my 40s and I'm not the CEO of Disney. Damn it. Actually, I still have another 20 years. Don't you worry. Exactly. But just always dream big, always aspire, and just go for it. Never be afraid. These are the things, like, young Liz always aspired, always had a drive, something that I was working towards.
Yeah, that's great. I love a quote or an inspirational expression. Do you have one that you'd like to share with us, Liz?
Always look at a glass half full, never half empty. Always
great
positive.
Advice. Yeah, great advice. Thank you. Liz, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been amazing. I've loved hearing more about your journey, and I already knew some of your journey, but I've loved learning even more about it. So and I know that the audience are going to find it so valuable as well. So any kind of last words of wisdom or encouragement that you'd like to leave them with before we go?
The one thing I would say is just always go and dream as big as you possibly can. That is the one thing that I would say. And I know I've said it a few times along this journey and this chat today, but that is the one thing I would say. It's never, don't let anybody tell you you can't.
Yeah.
Right? Never let anybody tell you you can't. Don't stop believing, because honestly, I was a terrible maths person. So when I tell people I'm in finance from when I was in school, they're like, what? So dream big, make it happen, always work hard towards it, and work hard.
Yeah, I love it. Liz, thank you so much. It's just been brilliant.
You're very welcome. It's been great to be on the show today.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed the show. If you gained any value out of today's episode, please help us spread the word by subscribing to the podcast. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, we would love your feedback. Please use the links in the show notes to get in touch. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.